I understand it now. It may have taken me a while to really fully digest what I really wanted to understand for a very long time, but finally, for this specific journey that I took for the past couple of days, I finally understand what this specific feeling is and why for a long time I was holding on to it until I finally realized that it is something that should have been different in the very beginning. What I'm trying to say here is that I decided to reread one of my favorite short stories of all time, which is written by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is White Nights. This is the very first story that I've read multiple times, so I read it for the third time a couple of days ago, just to somewhat understand what it's trying to say. So, this particular short story tells a story of a particular person who is not much of a loner, but someone who has grown to just be on his own in the city that he is used to, where every single bits and pieces of it, he knows it by heart, the way they look like, who passes that street, who lives there, what happens here. Somewhat peaceful to him and how it looks like and how it feels like. And one white night, hence the title, one white night while he was walking on his own, he found a woman, a young woman whose name is Nastenka, who was crying, and he tried to be there to somewhat comfort her, just to give it so much more perspective. And from that moment on, he fell in love with this lovely young woman. And the thing about it is that with the way their conversation is going, he then understood that this particular woman is crying because of waiting for someone else. And he had struggles on how to somewhat fully reveal his feelings at first. But when he did not stop yapping. He did not shut up at all. He particularly put everything out there. And just to give note, he just met this woman and he decided to put everything that he feels in his poetic manner of sorts. And the thing about that is you can realize how this person has been waiting for a very long time to express such emotions to someone. And for that particular white night or nights, he found this lovely young woman to somewhat open his heart to. And it was already indicated when you're reading this particular short story that this guy professed his love in the very beginning, while this young woman indicated that the love that she feels is something different, a brotherly love or so. And then when everything comes to the point that he may have a chance at finally having this young woman with him, everything just went back to the way it used to be, where they will not be together, and that this girl will be with someone that she truly loves in the very beginning. And I somewhat put so much thought about this particular thing because I love how coincidences work in this particular thing. That he was at the right moment at the right time to meet this woman, but the dilemma is that they are not right for each other. In the very beginning, this is not a love story, and it's more of a understanding of a particular person who's just waiting for that opportunity to somewhat explain how he really lives his life. He may come off as eccentric, different, and somewhat longing for something that he has yet to feel all his life. And for those handful of moments that they shared during those white nights, he finally realized that another morning comes and it's not for them. That's why it's in white nights because that is the particular moment in time that they could share something together, that they could be what they wish to be together. But that's it, nothing more to that. And I myself had some white nights on my own, that didn't work out too. That's why I thought that this book translated well to me, because I even had those interactions where I had opportunities to somewhat speak of how I truly feel. That something that I cannot tell to my friends, to my family, but in that particular moment, it just seemed perfect. Somewhat tell those stories to her or to that particular person. And that's why I thought, what does it say about me? And at the same time, what is it trying to say to me? And that's when I realized that I understood this before, but it is much more evident now. So after reading White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky, I decided to rewatch one of my favorite films. I know that's a red flag thing to say, especially with the outfit I'm wearing. I think it's appropriate to speak about it, which is 500 Days of Summer. If I'm not mistaken, this one is directed by Mark Webb, and it's starring Zoe Deschanel in her finest form here. Like, this is peak Zoe Deschanel in terms of acting. The way she acted here as Summer is top notch, and we have my favorite red flag of all time, Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Tom. And I'm not saying that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a red flag. He's one of my favorite actors, but Tom is one of the biggest red flag characters of all time. And the thing about Tom in particular is we're watching it in his perspective. And I really love that there's a particular interview with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Drew Barrymore where he said something like this. And from there you can somewhat stop and understand, like, so that's what he's trying to imply all of these days. Because when I was young, again, the term is when I was young, when I was probably like 16, 17, or 18, when I got to watch this film numerous times, I always think of myself as Summer being the villain of this story of sorts, like F Summer. That's the idea in the film also. But then as I grow older, the more that I understand, in the very beginning, she said something that is specific and to the point. Now, the thing is, these characters are so beautifully written that I know that's a wrong sentence to say, but or description, but that's how it is. With the way that they were written and how they were presented and acted, you will really empathize with both of them. Even though at the very beginning, the way that this film started, it already emphasized that it is a not. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say, it is not a love story, and indeed, it's not. It's not a love story because in the very beginning, even though it's a coincidence that they got to meet, and it was a coincidence that somewhat led them to somewhat, have such white nights of their own. Summer specified that she is not looking for something serious, and Tom agreed. If you watch the very first part of this film, you will see Summer as someone specifically stating that she does not want to be in a relationship. She said that she's young, she has time to have fun, and just to somewhat explore. She's not looking for anything that is filled with commitment. And I think if you dwell on that, that will direct you to what the film is trying to say. It's all a huge misunderstanding, not with both of them, but on the part of the main character, which is Tom. If you watch the entire film, the way that this is presented is something that I pointed out earlier. It started with having it's like one by one squares, two of them, one showing Tom in his youth, one showing Summer in her youth, and the way that they have different backgrounds, different pasts, different stories, and different realities, to the point that it was used to somewhat tell a story of sorts on how expectations and reality are different from themselves. And that's something that also that was also pointed out by Joseph Gordon-Levitt as one of his favorite parts of this entire presentation. I think there's an interview where he said that in particular, just this one.
Okay, expectations versus reality. This is what was written in the script. So it's such a good idea from a writing perspective, and it's also just so well executed from a filmmaking perspective. So this just is one of those moments where you read it in a script and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you see it and you're like, wow, that's exactly what I would have hoped for. And that doesn't always happen when you try new things. They really
And the thing about that is you get to see what Tom sees and what Summer experiences, because that's the two different things in that in particular. Tom is someone, I'm not saying that he is delusional, but he's someone who has ideas, and those ideas are the ones that he fell in love with. He fell in love with the idea of Summer instead of Summer herself. He focused on what he feels right for him compared to what's actually happening in the situation. Indeed, they shared romantic emotions or romantic nights. They shared dates. They shared kisses. They made love that made sense. But the thing is, at the very beginning, it was already emphasized that Summer does not want a committed relationship. And the thing about that is, it became an issue in the very end of it all, and they tried to make sense of it. And it's also something that I actually love about White Nights, and I feel like something that somewhat ties it all together with 500 Days of Summer is because at the end part of this particular story, like two chapters or one chapter before the end, similarly with the film, at the start of the third act, before he got himself together, they somewhat address their emotions and what they can do. Tom is telling Summer that he has a say in it and that they are in a relationship. He wants to put a label on things. He doesn't want it to be just like this or that. He wants them to be together. He does not want going out with Summer anymore without no labels of sorts. Similar with how the main character in White Knights wanted to make something out of his relationship with Nastenka when Nastenka is having problems with waiting for this particular guy to arrive. And the thing about it is that when that particular scene happened in 500 Days of Summer, Tom is somewhat distraught and somewhat besides himself. He just really locked in with what he thinks should be the thing between him and Summer. And at first, I felt like when I was young, I was like, huh, why does Summer just do all these things and think that's not something that people should be doing if they're in a relationship or something? Like questioning, why do these people do things like this and not commit to a relationship? Because I myself, and something that happened to me when I was young, I had a particular relationship that actually went that way, where at first she does not want to be together, and I was like, okay, sure about that. And then we started doing things together, and then somewhat became like a relationship, but it never had a label on it. But we had this understanding that we're together, kind of like 500 Days of Summer. And funny enough, like we broke up after 500 days, I think, or something like that in that range. So I realized that I had something with that person that felt like that. And at first, I hated that person because of what we had. Until I fully understood a couple of years after that, so that's what it meant. We were too young to fully understand what we had at that time. And seeing it with two people that are more mature, that are in the workspace, because I was in college during that time, I know nothing about life. But the thing about that is, people have different points of views, and the thing is, you agreed to be part of that situation. So if you want to meet in the middle, he can do that. You can try and have a conversation about it. But if that's the way they look at it, we cannot force them to change their mind. Because I also had that part when I was young that I was like, we should be together. We're doing these things that couples do together. So what makes that different from us not having a label? Similar with Tom, like we're doing something that couples do together. Why can't we have a label? So to the point that I was like, huh, so that made sense now to me. Because I was expecting more from that person, which is, by the way, one of the loveliest person I've ever met, I've ever shared a life with for that 500 days or so. So I'm really grateful for her for that. So shout outs to her. But the point is, there's a particular scene in this film where it's like interviewing the three characters, Tom and his two best friends. One of his best friends said that he has this idea of what he likes from a woman. It's someone with big jugs or so. It's really playful. Like he is talking about his ideal woman, of how they look, how they act, and sorts of like how his idea is of a woman that he probably would like. But then that's a word, like. But then
Truthfully, Robin's better than the girl of my dreams. She's real.
because among the three of them, only he has like an actual good relationship, and he said that what makes his relationship and what makes the woman that he's with special, that he'll never exchange with for anything, is that she's real, and she is someone that supported him all throughout. She's real, and that particular notion is not counteracting or somewhat telling that Summer is not real, but they have this conversation, they have this understanding that what they have is real and not based off of just ideals and desires that not everyone can reciprocate, because that what happened with Summer and with Tom. They have a particular goal and vision in mind, with Tom having such specific details of things that he wants to have with Summer, while Summer just wants to go with the flow and somewhat understand how everything goes. And it was until the end part where they finally meet again after breaking up of sorts, where Tom finds out that Summer got married. And the thing about it is that that is where you will understand that specific exchange in dialogue where Summer just said that she found or she felt something with that particular person that she was never sure of with Tom, and that that person came at the right place at the right time at the right moment where everything just clicked, because they didn't meet by coincidence of them meeting at work where they work in the same place. So it's indeed the right time, the right place, but they were not in the right direction together. They did not meet in the middle at the very beginning. They are heading in different directions, and they tried to force, or maybe Tom tried to force, to create a connection in there. While as for what Summer felt with his her husband, is that it had just all clicked at that moment. Even with the amount of time that she spent with Tom, that really didn't matter compared to the amount of time that she spent with this guy, because she was sure of it. And the thing about that is, even in White Knights, even if the main character here tries to somewhat, not necessarily force, but put the idea out there that they could be together instead of her waiting for this particular person to go back to her. When that particular person came back, it all made sense. Nastenka chose that person that she waited for because that's where she felt she should be. And I think the beauty of it all, the reason why I wanted to somewhat juxtapose two different stories in one particular concept, is because a lot of people, men, women, everyone, expects a lot from each other. And I think what's really missing in there is that we should be able to communicate well and not expect something that is blatantly mentioned in the very beginning that cannot be reciprocated. Because if we try to force something out of people that they in fact said in the very beginning they cannot give, that will just destroy the bridges that you guys have mended and created together. And I also love the idea here that Tom is a writer of cards, but he's actually an architect by with its education, and that it was after they broke up that they finally somewhat find their ways back to the world. With the way Tom finally gets himself straight and somewhat give his life a try once again, and somewhat pursue something that he's been aiming to do for a very long time, and that he finally decided to try and become an architect again. And it wasn't easy for him in the very beginning, but by the end of it all, he somewhat the right place at the right time
My
meets
name's
someone
Tom.
new,
Nice to meet you.
and her name is
I'm
Autumn.
Autumn.
And I think with the beauty of that is you get to see that there's specific moments in time that just happens by chance and somewhat feels right or felt right. And that's the thing that actually works out. Because the beauty of it all with 500 days of summer is that at first you will hate particular characters with the way they are, depending on what situation you are in and what you are used to. But as you grow older, if you try to rewatch it and have a better mindset of things or perspective, you will really understand that indeed both of them had mistakes. But what we see here is the point of view of the guy, of a guy who's expecting way too much expectations, desires, and realities that the other person cannot reciprocate. And she cannot reciprocate it not because she's not human or whatever, that she's a robot or whatever, but because that's something that she's not really into. That's something that she's not locked into. And that's something that should be understood or somewhat dwelled upon, so that there will be no instances wherein they would have to really go into such deep despair and depression. And as you can see with the way that they pointed it out, you first see the beauty of this particular person even with their imperfections, and you will grow to hate them because you did not get to meet such expectations. I think that's a human thing to feel or suffer from suffer with or whatever, but it is important that we grow upon those mistakes and learn to be better, so that not only will we learn to love ourselves better, but we will learn how to see things better and guide ourselves to the right path. Instead of expecting way too much from people, we can just simply let things go the way they're supposed to be. And one day, who knows, at the very right spot, at the very right corner, you will get to share it with someone that you've been waiting for a very long time. So I do understand it now. It may have taken me longer than 500 days. It may have taken me multiple white nights. But what truly matters is it will come at the right time, the right place, the right corner, wherever that may be. Well, we'll be waiting. So that's my yapping for this week. In case you don't see me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Peace out. Respect.